So, I hope that you can hear me, and welcome back to the second episode of the Oikokastel podcast, where oiko comes from the word oikos, I think, if I remember correctly. Might be wrong there, actually. And it's the grandfather or grandmother of economy and ecology. And yeah, that is actually quite it. Anyway, today we're going through another summary of another apparently very important book for architects or architecture students, whatever you are. I am the latter. And it is Architectural Form, Space and Order by Francis D.K. I guess Ching. I'm actually not quite sure, but I guess Ching. And today I've actually used ChatGPT to make me a summary of it and give me like the key insights of it. I do hope that this information is actually correct, but we are anyway going to go through it and, maybe some of you or maybe I can detect whether there's something wrong with it. Anyway, so this book is one of the most fundamental books on architectural design, often used as a textbook for architecture students. It provides a clear visual and conceptual understanding of architectural form and spatial composition. Below is a detailed summary of the book, organized by its major themes and also chapters, apparently. Overview. The book explores how architectural elements, form, space, and order interact to create meaningful and well-structured designs. Ching, I hope it's actually Ching, uses detailed diagrams and sketches to illustrate architectural concepts, making it an essential resource for students and professionals alike. The book is structured around fundamental architectural principles that govern how spaces are created and also experienced. So I think I should mention or point out that because this is just a summary, going through or buying the book might be necessary or might just be very smart to do, because first of all, because of the diagrams, I guess, and second of all, because even more information. Let's go through the key concepts and also chapters. Primary elements of design. The section introduces the basic elements of architecture. Point. The most fundamental elements serve as a marker or a reference. Line defines shape, guides movement, and creates boundaries. Plane, a flat surface that defines two-dimensional space. And volume, the three-dimensional aspect of form, defining space. These elements, when combined, shape the foundation of all architectural compositions. I think in the end, yes, even though it is or can be way more complex, but I think when we're looking at rather old buildings with a lot of ornaments, we can clearly see that they are often made up of various different volumes, and when having a look at sections, one could also talk about lines there. Period. Form and space. This chapter focuses on how form and space relate to each other. Types of forms. Geometric forms like cubes, spheres, pyramids, etc. Subtractive and additive forms, removing or adding portions of a shape. And transformation of forms, linear, centralized, clustered, radial transformation of these forms. It kind of reminds me a bit, or I was just thinking about what we've gone through the last time where we've talked about figures, positive and negative space. And I was just wondering whether when we are subtracting a certain form from another certain form, whether one could play with this negative space there as well. I guess depending on what we're talking about, of course, but it might actually be interesting to not only create negative space in, like, say, a ground floor or ground plan kind of scenario, but also in kind of a section scenario. Might actually be really interesting and or useful. One might be able to create spaces, I guess. I'm just philosophizing here. One might be able to create spaces that feel maybe secure or might actually feel quite dangerous or might make you anxious based on this shape and or form that it is only implying and not necessarily showing. But yeah, just some thoughts here. Types of spaces: positive versus negative space, defined or undefined spatial enclosures. Spatial organization, arrangements like centralized, linear, radial, clustered, and grid organizations. Spatial relationships, space within space, adjacent spaces, interlocking spaces, and spaces linked by a common space. Might be a corridor, I guess. This section emphasizes how architecture is not just about creating objects, but also shaping the spaces between and within them. Might give me the opportunity to dive into the second part of this podcast today, which is Kastel, German or Austrian dialect for Kästchen, I would say, or Kasten, referring to boxes, shoe boxes, if you will, and the fact that a lot of architecture nowadays tends to be just shoe boxes, just boxes. And I was wondering, and whether, and I've been thinking about it. I'm really interested in what you're thinking about that too. I was wondering if this is like the end goal of human existence, living in boxes. While I do understand that, tables are kind of boxes too, if you're thinking about bounding boxes, chairs as well. Like there's quite all of the things that I'm just looking at in my room, they are somewhat square shaped, let's say, and they do have one flat side to push against the wall or whatever. And, but what came first, the egg or the chicken? What came first, the shoebox house or the shoebox furniture? But I think in the end, I do believe that humans are worth more, or should get more than just this shoebox. And so thinking about those spaces and trying to create spaces, I think is a goal that makes people feel good about themselves and actually makes them also feel good about their life and about their existence, I think probably is more than just a shoebox. But yeah, anyway. That is this. Right, the third one, the role of proportion and scale. This section explores how proportion, the relationship between elements, and scale, the size of an element relative to a human or another object, influence design. Classical proportions like golden ratio and the Fibonacci series, human scale, how architecture relates to the human body, and anthropometry and ergonomics, the study of human body dimensions and how they affect design. Ching explains how proportion systems such as Le Corbusier's modular impact architectural aesthetics and also functionality. I think at this point using the golden ratio and or the Fibonacci series might be kind of boring actually. I'm coming from a graphic design background, or I'm having a graphic design background, and when in doubt just use the golden ratio or the Fibonacci series. But while I think it often does work, at some point it's kind of boring. And we have seen it. I think it's the same thing with the Voronoi pattern or tessellation, whatever. We have seen it, we have seen it just so many times that it's maybe just not use it. The fourth chapter, Ordering Principles in Architecture. Ching outlines 5 key ordering principles that bring clarity and coherence to architectural compositions. Axis, a linear element that organizes spaces and forms along a path. Symmetry, I guess we know what symmetry is. Hierarchy, emphasizing certain elements to create focal points. Rhythm and repetition, creating order through repeating elements. And also transformation, modifying elements to fit new contexts. These principles help designers create visually and functionally effective spaces. I do believe, and this is something that I've been thinking about and also talking about for quite a while now, that especially designers, but I think we all do recognize when something feels off about a space or about a design or about, also two-dimensional things like logos or a layout or whatever. We all do recognize what is wrong, but a small portion of us knows what is wrong with whatever we are looking at, and can actually interpret those feelings that we're having. So I often feel like when I'm designing something, when I'm making something, there is something wrong with it. And very often, not gonna lie, I just don't know what it is. I just don't know what the problem is, or what feels off, or what I don't like about what I've just created. But I believe that it is a really important feeling to notice and recognize and also think about, because there probably is something wrong, or there probably is something off. And maybe also on the other hand, if you're creating something and you're feeling like there is nothing wrong with it, then it might actually also be the case that there is quite a lot of wrong with it. And you might just lack this feeling, I guess often the case very early in one's educational career, that whatever we're creating might actually be kind of good, and or we are searching for the good things rather than searching for what is wrong with it. But I guess axis, symmetry, hierarchy, rhythm, and repetition and transformation are actually some really key elements or key things to use. And I believe when one of those things is off, we notice it. We really notice it. The fifth one, circulation and movement through space. Movement plays a crucial role in how we experience architecture. This chapter covers types of circulation paths like linear, so hallways, radial paths spreading from a central point, spiral, continuous movement in a curved manner, and also a grid structured movement in a systematic layout. Approach and entry, how people engage with the building. Movement through space, how a building guides users through different areas. Spatial relationships and views, how openings, paths, and transitions frame experiences. This section teaches us how architecture can control, guide, and enhance movement through intentional spatial design. And I guess choosing the right one here is quite crucial. I might not be, maybe I don't really want to have a hallway in front of my toilet. Maybe I don't want to have some sort of spiral leading up to my toilet. Maybe there should be something more direct. Maybe even I don't know in the end if there is also no circulation, or the opportunity of having no circulation. But yeah, anyway. The entry and the approach. The entry is actually often something that I'm forgetting about when I'm thinking about plans and or sections. I think it is really important aspect. Where's the entry and where's also the exit? How do I move? So where do I start this movement through the building? The movement through space. Does it guide me? Maybe sometimes it's actually good also not to guide someone. I'm actually just thinking about museums, and I at least think I tend to not go the quote unquote normal or regular path, or choose the normal/regular path, because I don't know, I think sometimes the problem is also the people, that one must also think of the people as objects, in terms of when the user is going through a space, one is encountering furniture as objects and walls as objects, so to speak, or as boundaries, but in the end it's also humans, and which may or may not make a room or circulation in itself pleasant or unpleasant. So I think this is also something to consider. Having some sort of having some spaces where people can gather, so that those circulation paths are free to use, and or maybe having a limit of people being in a room might smart as well. Light, views, and openings. Ching emphasizes how light and views shape spatial perception. Natural light versus artificial light, the role of daylight in defining space. Openings and transparency, the effect of doors, windows, and skylights on visual and spatial experience. Framing views, how openings can direct focus towards key architectural elements or landscapes. And I think this can actually be also a good way to emphasize certain things that you think are important, or one thinks are important. I would say actually also with color. I don't know if this is something that comes up, but I don't think so. One might also be using color to emphasize certain elements that one thinks are maybe interesting or important for a certain space. Might actually be also about, structural things. Very often we tend to try to hide them, what it is. I don't know, some sort of bar or a column or a beam, whatever it might be. I think sometimes it might be interesting, or it could be interesting to emphasize these points for some reason. I guess it depends on the concept. But anyway, natural light, the light in general, really important. And maybe also how this light is framed. Just thinking about my window. I'm living in a rather old building. It's, I guess, from I don't know when it was built, but I think 18 something or 17 something, maybe 19 something. It's actually quite old. And the windows, they're having those, I guess in German they're called Sprossen. I actually don't know. In the end, I'm not having like a full window, but it is separated into rectangles. And I actually very often, and there might have been a reason for that structurally for this window or whatever, but it really does give me a different feeling compared to like a plain window without any separation. But I guess sometimes this could also be a useful tool to frame a certain view. I'm just thinking about, I don't know by whom this project was or is, but it was some sort of a wall, and on this wall there was just a window frame, like without glass, without the actual window, but to frame this certain view and to give it actually also more significance. And when you're sitting in front of it, and I think there was a table and like a chair or something, and when you're sitting in front of it or next to it and you look out of it, there is like this certain view that you should be having or you are having. So maybe this is something to play around with. Also, just not doing so might be interesting. Framing views, yeah. Enclosure and the definition of space. This section focuses on how spaces are enclosed and how their boundaries shape perception. Walls, ceilings, and floors, the elements that enclose space. Solid versus void, the balance between built from and open space. Degrees of enclosure, ranging from fully enclosed rooms to open pavilions. Ching discusses how these enclosures define the experience of a space, affecting privacy, openness, and also circulation. Context and design integration, which I think is the last one yet. Architecture does not exist in isolation, it responds to its surroundings. Site and context, how buildings relate to their environment. Cultural and historical context, the role of traditions and heritage in architecture. And climate response, adapting designs based on climate, passive solar strategies, for example. Quite often I'm actually seeing some projects that really are giving a shit about the context they are built in. And a lot of people, and I think we're often seeing that in social media comments, really dislike this fact that this building is trying to be some sort of a... It's not really integrated in the context, might actually also not be really integrated in the landscape. Sometimes it's the case that it is integrated in the landscape, but the shape and form is just completely different compared to whatever is around it. And a lot of people don't like that. And I understand that. And I think sometimes it might just be smart to try a little bit to integrate it into the architectural context, not only in the environmental or the landscape context. But I don't think that it has to be like I'm just thinking about a village or some sort of a street, and all of the houses look the same. They're all having the same roof design. They're all having like the same, the same windows. And I do understand the importance of having some sort of connection or some sort of similarity. But I don't know if I guess it would actually be quite interesting to see just more different kinds of houses. But once again, it might make sense to have some rules so that, I guess it's also strenuous for the eyes seeing so many different shapes, forms, proportions, colors in one street. So there probably should be some sort of a guideline. The conclusion. Architectural form, space and order is a comprehensive guide to architectural fundamentals. Through diagrams and detailed explanations, Ching provides an essential framework for understanding spatial organization, proportion, circulation, light, and design principles. This book is valuable not only for architecture students, but also for designers and professionals seeking a clear and systematic approach to architectural composition. Would you like a more specific summary focusing on any particular topic? No, we might be going through something similar or something like that in the next one. But up until then, have a good day, take care, and I'll see you the next time. So, bye-bye.